TV is an interesting medium. You've got either 30 minutes or an hour to tell a story once a week, keep viewers hooked and watching, and compete with other time slots and real life getting in the way. This is why most shows have always been episodic, status quo, disconnected stories that never really develop, until recently where things like DVD box set prices, Netflix, and the realization that people will stick around to watch the show if there's something actually there to watch, made shows like The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, and Game of Thrones possible. Yet around 30 years ago, there were two shows that dared to go against the grain and actually told ongoing and complex stories. The first, Twin Peaks, was directed by David Lynch and, believe it or not, was one of his more coherent works. It told a story that focused on the murder of a girl in a small town, and that mystery captivated audiences across the country. But the mystery was solved halfway through the second season, and after that it was a commercial failure but a cult success. See, the best part of Twin Peaks for a lot of people wasn't who killed Laura Palmer, it was, why is this guy pouring sugar into that guy's gas tank? What does this scene even mean?
Laura Palmer?
Jeg føler jeg når som arms, my arms went back. She's very vicious.
It eventually got a continuation in 2017, much to an ever-increasing number of people's delight. It was just a show ahead of its time for the most part. The second show I mentioned earlier is The X-Files, which was a lot more popular, getting a 9-season run starting in 1993, and also continuing with 2 more seasons in 2016 and 2018. If you've never heard of The X-Files or are one of those heathens born after 1995 who refused to watch anything made before 2010, FBI agent Mulder is assigned to the X-Files section of the FBI. Basically, the unexplainable cold cases because a vampire shot Bigfoot, so they just throw the case in the garbage. Mulder, directly inspired by Twin Peaks detective Cooper, is there voluntarily because he wants to find his missing sister, supposedly abducted by aliens, while Agent Scully is assigned there to determine if the department of one person is a huge waste of time and money.
The reason you're here, Agent Scully, is we want you to assist Mulder on these X-Files. You will write field reports on your activities, along with your observations on the validity of the work.
There's a few interesting things about the X-Files that made it last for so long. First, it's about 50% Monster of the Week episodes and 50% story arc episodes, and they're making it all up as they go along. There's only one constant and definitive antagonist through all 11 seasons, the Smoking Man, and he believes he's justified in what he does. Everything else is half a dozen plots bootstrapped into one semi-coherent one that still isn't definitively the truth. There's alien colonists, which might just be clones, there's the black oil, which could just be an ancient unearthed life form, and so on. Which is the second thing that's either great or infuriating about the show, opinions may vary greatly. At the end of a plot, whether it's a Monster of the Week or a multi-episode story arc, it's rarely clear about whether the driving force was supernatural or something explainable by silence.
I ran a lab test on it. The material could not be identified.
Alien spaceship or secret high-tech government aircraft? Are you a Mulder or a Scully? My point here is that even they're making it up as they go along. They, first of all, weren't over-ambitious about it like Lost, where the long build-up disappointed everyone. Rather than one thick, long plot thread, they used lots of short, loose ones that they could mold into whatever shape they needed at any point in time. Or just tie it off to end that plot entirely and not have any loose ends. Using this method, they were able to do things with the characters that were a bit experimental. Is their boss on their side, or is he a double agent? Who's this mysterious guy that we know nothing about? We'll never find out, he's dead now. It's a bit of a magic trick, where they always have cards up their sleeves, and the way the story naturally flows is the card you picked. Amazing! Some episodes are just, screw it, we're gonna do what we want experiments, and some of those are considered the best episodes.
You still gonna hold the boy?
Oh, you bet your blankety blank bleep I am.
Yeah, but the victim seems to confirm his alibi.
The hell she did? Those kids' stories couldn't be more bleeping different.
What do you want with us? What do you want with us?
How did the alien respond?
Well, all he did was...
One of them, albeit not one exactly considered a greatest hit, Drive, starred Bryan Cranston as the antagonist. If it weren't for that episode of The X-Files, Breaking Bad would have never been made.
I want to do this episode where it's Mulder and this bad guy in a car. And this guy's going to die if they don't stop driving the car westward. The guy's head's going to explode because of this weird sympathetic vibration that's been set off in his head by some Navy top secret radio wave shit, whatever. So, but I want this guy, I want us to sympathize with this guy, but I want to stack the deck a little harder against him. I want this to be more challenging to write. I don't want him to just be some nice poor schmuck who I'm going to feel sorry for when he dies at the end. I wanted him to be an asshole. I want him to be a creep and kind of a racist and kind of just unpleasant, anti-Semite, kind of a creep. And yet I still want to feel for him when he dies at the end of the hour. So all of this long-winded way of saying that we're looking for a guy to play this role, essentially a two-hander, our star and a guy in a car for 45 minutes. And all of a sudden, one day, Rick Milliken, our casting director, brings in Bryan Cranston, who I'd never heard of. This was about a year and a half before Malcolm in the Middle went on the air. It was before Malcolm in the Middle. And Bryan comes in, and he just nails it. He's like, as soon as he's done, as soon as he walks out, we're shaking his hand, and I looked at the other guys and said, OTW, which off to wardrobe. It's what you say when you essentially, like, that was the guy, let's stop looking now. Let's just sign him up. He was fantastic. He had everything we needed. He was scary. He was a fantastic dramatic actor, and yet he had some humanity that kind of came through, leaked out of his pores or came out of his eyes. I don't know what it was. That he committed completely to the nastiness, the anti-Semitic nature of the character, the racism, just the hillbilly Peckerwood kind of creepiness of the character. He committed 110%. And yet also he beamed out this kind of, I don't know if he's even aware how he does it, but he was nonetheless sympathizable.
Ultimately, the show was ended the first time at season 9 because of low ratings, most likely due to David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson beginning to work their way out of the show starting in season 8, with Mulder mostly being running silhouette man. Shows don't survive their main cast being replaced. It actually did surprisingly well compared to most shows that have done that. Sliders, for example, which also aired around the same time, switched out several of their leads, mostly because of money and contract reasons, and was cancelled at the end of the first season they did that. Yet, unlike so many other mid-90s shows that suffered the same fate, The X-Files is still fondly remembered, despite the fact that the second of the new seasons was a ratings nightmare to the point that it seems like someone missed a decimal point. I think the reason such a long-running and older show is still popular, at least the original episodes, is because some of the reasons I mentioned earlier. If you picked it up at any time during its initial airing, you might not have a clue about what's going on, but odds are the next episode is a random Monster of the Week episode that you don't need to know anything about in order to get it. In fact, the creators of the show used this to their advantage at one point. When the show would air after the Super Bowl, instead of a less traditional episode, they switched to one that was a bit more like the usual ones, Leonard Betts, an episode about an EMT who could regrow body parts like a lizard and fed on cancer, making him essentially immortal. After attacking Scully, she realizes she has cancer, which spun off a new plot arc and successfully hooked many people who had never seen the show before. This was the highest rated episode of the entire series in terms of viewers. In order to prevent the bloated inaccessibility and entry barring for new viewers, each season sort of has its own mini plot arc that gets resolved relatively quickly, at least within that season, so new viewers can figure out what the problem is and focus on that and ignore the other things they don't understand, and eventually catch on and figure it out on their own. While the show does have some cringy early 90s CGI scenes, the last 2, or 4 I guess, seasons aren't the best. The show is permanently cancelled because of low ratings that would make any producer flinch, and there's still all kinds of unanswered questions and hanging plot threads. But it's still an unforgettable classic that I could at least watch over and over. Speaking of which, there's a whole series of videos that I make about shows that are binge-worthy, just like this one. Though this video was a bit more about the show's lasting appeal than an introduction to it, since I figure most people that watch my videos are at least familiar with the basic premise of the show. If you have a favorite episode of The X-Files, leave it in the comments. I think mine's Eve, all the way back from season 1.
Why were these men after your dad?
They wanted to exsanguinate him.
If you liked this video, subscribe for more, like the like button, and share it on your social media of choice for internet appreciation points. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.